Alright guys, welcome to another video on Dynasty, and in today's video I'm going to give you guys a couple of tips on how to do well in ranked matches, especially when you're a solo free-to-play player. Now let's first take a look at my stats this season just to show that I do have some credentials, right? I am currently only at Legendary Star, so I haven't quite hit peak Superstar yet. However, if you actually take a look at my win rate, I've managed to get 96 wins out of 155 matches, which is actually a 62% win rate. So literally that just shows if I play probably another 60 to 80 more games, I can definitely reach peak Superstar before the end of the season. So it's very easy for me to reach the highest level if I want to, literally just by playing more games. And if you take a look at how I'm meant to do that, look at my three most played characters: Adebayo, George, and Luca. They're literally the most free-to-play options out there because the game literally gives you them for free. Paul George, everyone can get them on day 2. Luka Doncic, everyone get him on day 5. Adebayo is one of the potential choices on day 7, and also you can get him as one of the options in the Pass of Stars after 21 days. So literally all three characters that I'm using, the game literally gives it to you for free. So there's no excuse for everyone not to be able to replicate the same amount of win rate as me. And also if you take a look at my MVP percentage rate, you can see that I'm not actually getting carried by my teammates. So it's not like I was lucky with matchmaking or anything like that. Vast majority of the time I'm actually carrying the team because I managed to get 40 MVPs out of my 96 wins, which once again translates to about 42% MVP rate, which is a lot higher than the usual 33% you should be expected to get when you're playing a 3 versus 3 match, right? So that's kind of just showing even with the most free-to-play characters out there, you can still do very, very well in this game. And just to show you, right, I'm completely free-to-play because the first top-up is still available. I haven't even bought this lifetime membership, which is like the most valuable thing in this game that you can buy. And to prove that I'm a solo player, if you take a look at my battle pass request, you can see I have never completed this team up in one rank game mission, just to show that I have done everything. I have climbed all the way up to Legendary Star by playing solo matches using the most free-to-play characters out there. So what is my secret on ranking so high as a solo free-to-play player? The answer is actually quite simple, which is just that you need to be comfortable with at least one player across each of the 3 positions. And when I say the 3 positions, I mean the centers, which is going to include some power forwards, by the way. Then the second position is going to be forwards, which is predominantly small forwards, but with a few selection of power forwards as well. And then the last one is going to be guards. And the reason why you want one good character from each of the position is because of 2 things. One is that when you actually are comfortable enough to play across all 3 positions, that basically allow your teammate to play to their best. Because now rather than you and your teammate needing to fight for the same position because you guys can only play that single role well, you can actually allow your teammates to play whoever is their best character, and then you fill in the gap. And because of team play, your teammates are actually playing their best character, then of course as a whole your team of 3 is going to perform better. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that when you actually rotate across the different positions, what you will end up learning is to see the game from other perspective and see it from your teammates' angle as well. So let's say if you already have some experience on how to play with Luka Doncic, when the next time your teammate is going to pick Luka Doncic, you know exactly what kind of challenger he's going to face when potentially he's trying to score or doing the defensive possessions, etc. as well. So what that basically means is that even when you're not actually playing as Luka Doncic, you know exactly when your teammate may be having trouble, and therefore you actually need to assist them in maybe defense or try to create scoring opportunity for them, etc. And that once again makes ease off the pressure on your teammate and therefore help your whole team perform better as a whole. And to be honest, there's really no excuse of you guys not able to do this because the game literally gives you one free player from each of the position. So like I said, on day 2 everyone get Paul George for free. On day 5 everyone get Luka Doncic for free, and then you have Adebayo as a choice on day 7. And even let's say if you already made a different choice and chose a different player for day 7 event, they actually have an event right now. If I just quickly show you guys, if you go into event, there's a summer login event. If you click on it, you can literally see all of those players that you're able to select from, and out of all of them, if you're actually missing a center, the one that I'm going to strongly recommend you guys pick up is either going to be Adebayo or Porzingis or potentially maybe Julio as well. And basically the reason is that all 3 of them is actually capable of stretch out the paint, which is actually going to be one very important quality as a center player, which I'll talk about in a bit. Now I'm going to go through the three positions one by one and give you guys my three best tips for every single position. Now starting off with the center, the first tip I'm going to be giving you guys will be what should you be doing offensive possessions, because a lot of time your center is actually going to be lacking that firepower. So what can you do during offensive possession to actually help out your teammate to create those scoring opportunities? There are actually three different things you can do, and which one you want to do is going to be dependent on which teammates you actually end up having. So what are the three options that you have? One is that you could be setting up a screen for yourself. So imagine if I'm the yellow center here, I could be setting up a screen for my guard teammate. The second thing I could be doing is that I could just sit underneath the basket for any dunking opportunity. Or the third thing is that I could try to stretch out the paint for any mid-range or three-pointer shooting opportunity as well. And like I said, you have a choice of three different things to do, but which one you'll be doing will be dependent on what kind of teammates you have. So starting off with whether you want to set up a screen or not, certain characters are very much screen dependent. So for example, the likes of Murray, Curry, or Luka Doncic, all three of them actually kind of require screen in order to create those open three opportunity. So if your teammate is actually one of those three characters I just mentioned, normally it's actually a good idea for you to actually try to create a screen for your teammate. Then on the opposite end, you have certain characters such as Booker, Clarkson, or SGA who don't really need screens. And in fact, because they will be driving around everywhere, if you actually try to screen for them, what you may actually end up doing is that you will be bringing whoever is marking you into the range of their drive. And as a result, you could actually end up, forcing your teammate to be bumped into doing their drive, or when they finally find some space to try to shoot, they will actually be contested by whoever is actually marking you. So that's kind of why if you're actually playing with teammates who are the likes of Booker or Clarkson or SGA, it's actually probably better for them to attack by themselves, and you don't actually try to get in their way by setting up any screens, etc. So that will be the choice that you have to make on deciding whether to screen or not. And then the next one is that should you be just sitting underneath the basket for any dunking opportunity. Now normally I only recommend this if both of your teammate is actually capable of shooting threes. And the reason for this is quite simple, is that your three-pointers normally needs actually a lot of room for them to maneuver around in order to create some distance from whoever they're marking against, and therefore creating those open three opportunities. However, if you are actually being out on the court, and as a result whoever is marking you is also here, you are actually limiting the amount of space your teammate is able to do, because you are effectively bringing someone else who can potentially assist in defending them. So as a result, the best course of action for you will actually be literally just sitting underneath the basket. This will force whoever is guarding you also to be near the basket in order to not give any open dunking opportunity, etc. And as a result, it gives much more room for your teammate to maneuver around. And this is especially important when both of your teammates are actually three-pointer, and therefore both of them need as much room for them to move around as possible. So that will be cases where you should actually be just sitting underneath the basket in order to free up space for your teammate. And then the third thing you can do would be try to stretch out the paint by looking for open mid or three-pointer opportunities. And normally I do this when one of my teammates is actually capable of attacking the basket themselves. So some example would be Luka Doncic, who can step in for a floater or layup, and also for example if your Paul George is your forward, you can go for a dunk as well. And the reason why I say those kind of scenarios it's actually a good idea for you to stretch out the paint is that normally centers are the one who are supposed to guard against any dunks or layup, because whoever is marking them man-to-man have to be mindful of any perimeter attacks, and as a result normally it's actually the job of the center to guard against any layup or dunks. However, if you're actually able to draw away the enemy center all the way to the outside, then it's actually going to leave a lot higher success rate for your teammate to actually go in and attack the basket. So in those kind of scenarios, I strongly recommend you actually picking a center who is capable of stretching out the paint. And in order to actually stretch out paint, you need to possess some open mid or three-pointer capability. And that's why I said earlier is that if you actually need to choose a center to play, it's normally better to choose the likes of Bam Adebayo or Porzingis or Julio, who actually have that offensive capability through shooting. Because let's say on the other hand, if you just play the likes of Capella or Giannis or Williams, Williamson, what could end up happening is that your the opponent will just let your center sit on the three-pointer line because they know even if you try to do an open three, it wouldn't go in anyway. So instead, they could just stay on the basket to attack against dunks from your teammate. So that's kind of why there's no point of stretching out the paint when you are not actually capable of any shooting mids or shooting three-pointer. And that's kind of why I normally give us the stretching paint centers a slightly higher priority, especially when you are doing solo matchmaking, just so that you have at least that choice of stretching out the paint if needed to. Okay, so that's the first tip for centers. The second tip I'm going to give for centers is going to be doing defensive phase. So now you actually imagine you are actually on the blue team and I'm this blue center. So what you typically want to do is obviously you want to man marking whoever the opponent center is because you don't want to give them any open dunks or open mid-range or open three-pointer choices. However, while you are defending against whoever you are man marking, you also want to be leaning slightly towards the side of the person who is actually ball handling. So let's imagine, for example, it's the enemy guard, this yellow guard who currently hold the ball. What you want to do is you want to edge slightly towards them so that you are in a position where you can both rush back to protect against any dunks and also rush outward to assist in any defense. And this is going to be very beneficial to help your team to defend because the virtue of you being slightly on the outside means that you actually kind of give pressure on where the opponent guard is actually able to move. Because, for example, let's say this enemy is actually Luka Doncic, who have the potential to step in for a floater or step in for a layup or SGA, for example. Just the virtue of you being slightly closer towards them basically means that their shots will be contested or blocked, etc. And as a result, it kind of forces them to look for opportunity either on the left or on the right or maybe go backwards, and as a result just kind of make your teammates slightly easier to guard against them. So that's kind of why it's a good idea for your center to just edge slightly towards them. The other beneficial thing would be, for example, if your teammate actually got ankle broken and fall down, what this then also allow you to do is for your center to quickly rush out with a dash button or a sprint button to quickly to assist any three-pointer. Whereas if you are literally standing behind the enemy center, then there's no way you could make up that distance. So that's kind of why it's always important for your center to be slightly leaning towards whoever is holding the ball. So I was giving an example when the enemy guard is holding the ball. Let's say if the guard actually passes it to the forward, what you don't want to do is obviously follow the ball and then you move slightly towards the right hand side to follow the enemy forward instead. So that's kind of what you want to do, some micro positioning when you are defending as a center. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is going to be a bit more situational, but in the cases when one of the enemy actually have a dedicated dunker, what you want to do is always swap defense so that you will be the one matching up against the enemy dunker. And when I say enemy dunker, what I normally mean will be the likes of Williamson or Giannis or Westbrook, who only have the capability of dunking and not really mid-range or three-pointer. And the reason why you want to do that is, like I explained earlier, normally center are the one in best place to actually block any dunks because they have higher block stats and also higher strength, etc., to actually contest against dunks. However, let's say if you actually match up against a center who's stretching on the paint, this is going to leave your own basket very vulnerable to dunks. And in those kind of scenarios, what you should be doing is that on the top of the screen, there's a button for you to request to switch defense with one of your teammates, and you should be requesting so that you will be swapped, so that you will be the one actually guarding against any players who is only capable of dunking. And what this allows you to do is give you a much better chance to actually block any dunks than what your teammate is capable of, and it also gives you a better position to go for any rebounds, because if you are actually being kind of stretched all the way on the outside, there may not actually be chance for you to go back in time to actually grab any rebounds. Whereas in this kind of scenario, when you actually switch up the matchup, so you are guarding against the forward and your own forwards guarding against the enemy center, the enemy center now will be positioned too far away to go back for any rebound, and therefore you will be in the best position to secure those rebounds instead. So that's kind of why whenever you see any scenarios when you are matched up against a center who may be stretching on the paint, however your teammate is actually matched up with someone who may attack the basket, you should always be requesting so that you will be the one swapped into defending the enemy dunker. Now let me move to the guard position and give you my 3 best tips for guards. Tip number 1 is going to be that you want to make full use of the 20 seconds when you are actually attacking. Now you do get 20 seconds to organize your attack, so there's absolutely no rush for you to try to score in the first 5 or 6 seconds. And also a lot of time your teammates may still be trying to get into position. When you actually just trying to rush your attack, your team may not actually be in the best position to actually help you, and therefore you're kind of ruining your own chance as well. So some of the best example would be, for example, your teammate may actually be trying to come and actually screen for you. So let's say I'm on the yellow team, right? My teammate may actually be rushing towards here to try to help out to set up screen. However, if you happen to be rushing attack without your teammate actually getting into a position and just force a shot, if your shot get contested, your teammate is still running towards you to set up a screen. There's no way they can then suddenly dash back to catch that rebound. So now not only you end up screwing up your scoring chance, you also make sure you lost the possession because now the enemy center will be in a better position to catch that rebound. So that's kind of why it's very important that when you're actually trying to do attacks as a guard, you make sure you keep an eye out on where your teammates are. It's not just about looking for open opportunities yourself, it's also be mindful of where your teammates are so that you know how likely is it for them to score, or how likely is it for them to actually get a loose ball in case you are blocked, or for them to actually secure a rebound in case you are contested. So those are all the things you need to be mindful of when you're actually organizing attack as a guard. And kind of the number 1 tip will just be you need to control the tempo. Now the second tip for guards is going to be during the defensive possessions, you don't actually want to overextend defense. Now this is a bit more complicated concept and kind of need the assistance from your teammates. However, a lot of time you can literally just use the presence of your teammate as a way for you to achieve this. Now what I mean by don't overextend defense is that normally you'll be tasked with man marking whoever you'll be defending. However, a lot of the guards in this game have the ability or the skill to drive and then drive backwards. So now let's say you're actually following whoever you're marking. Right, so let's say I am this blue guard and I'm trying to follow this yellow guard. The yellow guard will be trying to go to the right, maybe try to take advantage of any screens the enemy center will be trying to provide. And what you should be doing in those kind of scenarios is that you want to make sure you follow the enemy guard. However, you don't want to go past the enemy guard because on the other side your enemy center is likely going to help you to assist, or even if he's not going to help you to assist, the virtue of him being there is already going to give pressure for the enemy guard not to go too far into the right. So in those kind of scenarios, even though you're chasing the enemy guard, the enemy guard wouldn't risk going too far to the right when your teammates are also going to be there, and much more likely is they will try to force a shot straight away, or they will be driving backwards. So that's kind of why you don't really want to overextend defense. And the basic rule of thumb is that you don't never want to go past whoever you're marking, because the worst case scenario will be, let's say you are trying to follow the enemy guard, right? So the enemy guard is still moving to the right. You try to follow it, but what ends up happening is that both of you guys happen to be on the same side of the enemy. So basically you were starting off on the left, but then you were chasing the enemy guard, then you move all the way to the right on the same side as where your teammate center is. And now if the enemy is actually then driving back to the left, what's end up happening is that you may not be quick enough to react, and also because you have already moved to the right and moved into the way of your center teammate can't go past you to all of a sudden guard the enemy either. So in those kind of scenarios, the basic thing you want to do is that you want to take advantage of the fact that your teammate may help to assist, or just there's a presence of him, and you don't want to overextend defense. So when you're trying to do any double team up defense, it should always be one person on the left, one person on the right. You should never overextend so that both yourself and also your teammate happen to be on the same side of your marker. So that's kind of what I mean by the second tip that I'm going to give you guys, which is that when you're actually defending, try to make full use of your teammates' presence and don't overextend defense and happen to end up on the same side as your teammate. Okay, so that's the second tip for guards. And then the third tip for guards is going to be, this is kind of more during the transition phase. You have to be very, very aware of when a possession may be changing. Because a lot of time, let's say when you're actually attacking as a guard, you are trying to get away from whoever is marking you for that open 3 opportunity. However, let's say you manage to get away from them and then you force a shot. That shot was then contested and it didn't go in and you lost the rebound. What's actually ended up happening is that you're trying so hard to get away from your marker and all of a sudden possession change. They're now the one attacking and they happen to have an open 3 straight away. And you just lost 3 points instantly because you were trying to get away from them because you thought it was an offensive possession, but all of a sudden possession change. And this can also happen not just when your shots were contested, but also when it, for example, was blocked and as a result you lost the loose ball and all of a sudden the possession changed. So whenever you are trying to make shots as a guard, you first of all need to know whether your shot actually went in or not. And normally it's quite easy to tell because if a 3-pointer, for example, goes in, the camera will actually zoom in to show the highlight of that 3-pointer. If it's actually a 2-pointer, it's a bit harder for you to tell whether it went in or not until the last minute. However, in those kind of cases, what you want to keep an eye out is going to be where is your rebound going to be. Is it likely for you to win the rebound or for you to lose the rebound? Because your action is going to be very different. If you think your teammate is actually going to win the rebound because they just happen to be in a better position than the enemy center, for example, if they are rushing back to catch the rebound and your center is obviously much closer to the ball than wherever the enemy center is, in those kind of scenarios, you should be trying to still get as far away from whoever is guarding you as possible so that as soon as you win the rebound, you don't have an open 3 opportunity. However, if it's the other way around, you realize, for example, the center is actually trying to screen for you when you actually force that shot. As a result, he can't actually rush back, and the enemy center was just squatting under the basket, and therefore he is much more likely to actually catch that rebound. Then in those cases, you should immediately trigger that the possession might be changing. In those cases, I shouldn't be trying to get away to look for any open chance. Instead, I should be staying close with whoever I'm marking because it's going to be their turn to shoot very soon. And as a result, you don't actually let go of that free 3-pointer from your enemy. So that's kind of why you have to be very, very mindful whenever you force a shot. Is it likely for the possession to change or not? Because your action is going to be very much dependent on, whether you can win the rebound and the possession will still be offensive, or whether all of a sudden you'll become defensive possession. And either way, this is going to be a swing of 3-pointer because if you have open chance, that's a 3-pointer. If you lost that, you lost a 3-pointer. This is actually a massive difference. It's plus or minus 3 point. That's like a 6-point difference. So it's very, very important for you to be able to do this well. Okay, now let's move on to the last position, which is forward. And the number 1 tip is going to be you shouldn't really try to help your teammate by setting up a screen. And the reason for this is actually quite obvious because first of all, unlike centers, your forwards typically are smaller in size. So the effectiveness of your screen, first of all, is really going to be not as good as center. So if someone needs your help to set up a screen, it should be the center helping to set up a screen, not the forward. And the second thing is, once again, when you try to set up a screen, you will be bringing whoever is marking you into also end up in the way of your teammate. And a lot of the forwards in this game actually have very strong defensive capability. For example, LeBron James, incredibly strong block range. You don't have Paul George, who can get passive triggered whenever he contests a shot. All of them means really bad things if they happen to be in the way of your guard. So normally when you actually forward, the best idea is not to try to set up a screen because a lot of time you'll be backfire. Your screen is not good enough anyway because you are too small inside, and also you'll be bringing whoever's guarding you into guarding your teammate as well, and just a bad thing all around. So that's kind of why as a forward you shouldn't really be trying to set up a screen. Leave that job to your center instead, please. So that would be tip number 1. And then tip number 2 will obviously be, if I'm not trying to set up a screen, what should my forward be doing? Your forward should normally be trying to be at the correct distance away from your guard to look for any scoring opportunity. Because sometimes, depending on how good is your opponent defense, your guard may be able to find that scoring opportunity or not. If he's not able to find that scoring opportunity, a lot of time what may end up happening is that he will pass to you because you have much more of an offensive threat than the center and therefore you should then try to see whether you have any chance to actually score a point. And if you still don't have that, then you should be passing back to the guard to restart organizing the attack again. So that's kind of why you don't actually want to be too close to your teammate either, because if you're actually too close, what ends up happening is that you basically get into a position of 2 versus 2, and it's very likely that either of the opponent would then end up contesting either of your shots. So you kind of brought the defense of your own marker onto your teammate, and also you kind of end up risking your teammate's marker defending against you. So that's kind of why you definitely don't want to be too close to your teammate. However, you don't want to be too far from your teammate either, because a lot of time characters in this game cannot actually do a long pass successfully. Now, certain characters such as Luka Doncic do have skills to do a long pass safely. However, even if Luka, for example, can pass to you successfully, you can't actually pass back successfully if you want to reorganize that. So that's kind of why you don't want to stay too far away from your teammate guard either. So the ideal scenario for forwards is that whenever you are playing the offensive phase, you should always be keeping a correct distance away from the guard, so that's not too close where your forward will be end up defending against them, nor is it too far away so that your shots, so your long passes, may actually get intercepted or get stolen instead. So that's kind of why you need to kind of follow the movement of your guard. So let's say if your movement of your guard is towards the right, then you may have to go towards the right as well. Or let's say if the movement of your guard is so far to the right that you can't really move any further, then you may have to then move inwards a bit more. So once again, keep that distance away to draw the enemy who is marking you away from your teammate, but also at the same time keep that safe pass distance. So that's kind of why a lot of time you need to move in the same direction as your guard, or at least try to keep that correct distance all the time. So that would be the second tip of what to do during offensive phases as a forward. And then the third thing is more about what to do during defensive phases. And this one is a bit of a complicated one because a lot of time it's going to be depending on who are you match up against. So now let's imagine I'm matched on the blue team, so I'm this blue forward. Depending on the same with this game is that center is normally match up with center, that's obvious. Guard is normally match up with the guard. However, who the forward is going to be match up to can actually vary quite a bit, because maybe the enemy may be choosing a power forward instead, or they could be choosing a second guard player. So sometimes you could be marking players who have very strong rebound ability but not too much shooting ability, or sometimes you may be actually marking people who have ability to shoot threes. And the type of action you need to take accordingly during those defensive possessions is going to be very much dependent on that. So I'm going to give a simple example. Let's say whoever you are marking actually have the potential of shooting threes. In those kind of scenarios, you have to make sure you man mark them very tightly. And when you're doing that, you shouldn't be trying to risk going for any rebounds, etc. Because the vast majority of the time, when you're actually rushing in to go for rebounds, you are unlikely to win it anyway, because first of all, you will be further away from the basket than the center, so you are unlikely to win it, and your rebound ability will be lower than both the centers, so you won't be able to win it. And let's say if you actually lost that rebound, or your team lost that rebound, all of a sudden, the enemy forward have a free three-pointer that they can shoot in straight away. So once again, you will lose a 3 point. So that's kind of why, depending on who you're matching up against, you need to choose your actions very carefully. And if the enemy actually happen to be capable of shooting threes, you need to make sure you man mark them all the time. And in those kind of scenarios, you can't be affording to assist defense too much, and you can't afford to actually help your center for any rebounds, etc. However, let's say if it's in the other scenario where whoever you are guarding doesn't actually have too much offensive capability, then what you can do instead is actually helping your center out a bit more doing rebounds. And the way you want to do this, for example, when helping our center to rebound, is not actually go for the rebound yourself, because once again, your rebound ability is likely to be lower. But what you should be doing is actually blocking out the enemy center so that your center have a higher chance of winning rebound. So remember, whenever forward try to fight for rebound, vast majority of the time, it's not actually to make the jump yourself, it's actually to box out the enemy center. So that could be one way you can help the other team when you realize whoever you're guarding is not possessing too much of an offensive threat. And the other way you can help out is obviously actually assisting in defense. So once again, you could be moving slightly towards whoever is holding the ball. And when you are doing that, what you're doing is actually giving pressure for whoever is actually holding the ball not to extend too much onto the direction that you have. It also kind of position yourself in the direct line of any long range passes, so that if they try to force a long range pass, then you are actually in a prime position, to actually intercept it as well. So that's kind of what a lot of time what you should be doing as a forward is going to be hugely dependent on who you're matching up against.